Mark Rogers TV running down just about every bowl game we can possibly get to. And one of the more premier matchups prior to New Year's Eve is the December 29th matchup between North Carolina and Baylor. Of course, the Bears had college football playoff dreams starting the season and finished 9-3. And North Carolina, no one had them in the mix, but then they poured it on with 11 consecutive wins to get themselves on the brink of competing for a playoff spot. We bring in Mike McDaniel from inside the ACC to help us break it down. Mike, it's always a good time to look at the bowl games with you. And let's talk, actually, it being an ACC game. We're going to flip the script just a bit. I think the Baylor situation at quarterback, we talked about it before we came on, is obviously a major storyline in this. Seth Russell, a preseason Heisman candidate, dragged off the field against Iowa State. He had thrown 29 touchdown passes. So then they went with Jared Stidham, a five-star kid who threw 12 touchdowns against 2 picks. He played pretty well, but he got hurt. Chris Johnson was the third-string guy. They actually had to go to a fourth-stringer, a wide receiver, in Lynn Hawthorne in their final game of the regular season. So it's kind of a mess with Baylor, but with one healthy body at quarterback, they could become the Baylor of old.
Yeah, it's kind of funny because I think you and I were next up to play quarterback for Baylor. They went through pretty much everybody on their roster at the quarterback position that they hadn't redshirted. Like you said, Seth Russell was a Heisman candidate. Then they go to Jarrett Stidham, who also gets hurt. Then Chris Johnson gets knocked out of the game late in the season. And, they were rolling. They started 8-0 on the year, ended up losing 3 out of their last 4 games after being in the playoff mix for a good portion of the first couple of the rankings. So Baylor's injury woes are a big reason why that they're in the Russell Athletic Bowl and not competing in a New Year's Six game.
Might as well stay on this side of the football, Mike. When they throw it well, and if they've got the right guy at quarterback, then they can throw with just about anyone in college football. Corey Coleman is a monster at wide receiver, 74 catches, 20 touchdowns. He is off to the NFL. Katie Cannon is going to stay in Waco, but he's a tremendous threat as well with 46 catches and 6 touchdowns, and that doesn't account for Jay Lee, who's averaged over 20 yards per catch. So Baylor can definitely sling it around as long as they've got the right guy in place throwing the football. And North Carolina, much improved in the secondary from what we saw last year, but still is going to have its hands full.
Yeah, it was pretty funny because there was a tweet out right when all the bowl games were announced a couple Saturdays ago, and the Russell Athletic Bowl Twitter account tweeted about 15 minutes after the announcement of who was going to be playing in the game and said the score was already 7-7. I mean, these are 2 dynamic offenses. Baylor's averaging 7.2, almost 7.25 yards per play this year. And like you said, they throw it a ton. They're averaging almost 600 yards per game this year. And if they have the right guy at quarterback, Corey Coleman becomes extremely dynamic. He caught 20 touchdown passes in the first 8 games that didn't catch a single touchdown pass in the last 4, and that has a lot to do with all of the turnover at the quarterback position. But he's going to be a guy that's going to be one of the first wide receivers drafted next April in the NFL. So like you said, Baylor's offense is extremely dynamic. They throw it a ton, so the quarterback position is really important to their success, and hopefully they'll have a healthy guy or 2 for the bowl game that they can turn to just in case they have another situation where one of their quarterbacks is knocked out again.
I'm not surprised that the representatives from the Russell Athletic Bowl were tweeting as soon as this one was announced, but this is about as good a matchup as they could have hoped for. It's basically like a third-tier bowl game, and they pulled in a team that was on the brink at the top 10 and another one right there as well. So it's a nice matchup. Offensive matchups should get great TV ratings. And before we start talking Carolina, let's not forget that Baylor runs the ball about as well as most teams around as well, with Shaq Linwood gaining more than 1,300 yards, 6.8 yards per carry, 10 touchdowns. So they are balanced. They're known for throwing, but they are balanced, and obviously had to go with Linwood late in the season when they had the quarterback injury issues. Marquise Williams, a mainstay, playing his final game at North Carolina, could finish as one of the more prolific passers in the history of the school. 21 touchdowns throwing, 11 rushing. Your thoughts about the North Carolina offense, Mike?
Yeah, I think Marquise Williams improved vastly from the opener against South Carolina where he struggled. He threw those 3 huge interceptions. They got upset, or I mean, theoretically, they got upset by South Carolina, who didn't turn out to be even half of the team that we thought they would be. In no way did we think that South Carolina would be competing in the SEC, but I don't think anybody was expecting them to be as bad as they were. And it really went downhill once Steve Spurrier left. So Marquise Williams bounced back quite well, like you said, and over 30 touchdowns throwing and rushing combined this year really kind of set him apart and put him on the map. He was always a guy that was extremely dynamic at the quarterback position, but he struggled quite a bit to find his footing leading up to this season. He struggled a ton with turnovers, but this year he took better care of the ball. And I think a lot of that has to do with Elijah Hood at running back. Elijah Hood ran the ball for over 1,300 yards and 17 touchdowns this year, and he was a big reason why Marquise Williams was able to, see some more open throwing lanes, and he wasn't forced to carry the entire offense by himself. So it was huge for Elijah Hood and that North Carolina offense this year to gain some semblance of balance, because I thought they made them even more dynamic and put up the points that they were able to put up. And I think that's one area in this game where North Carolina is going to have distinct advantage. They run the ball so well, about 223 yards per game, and Baylor's rushing defense, to put it kindly, has not been very good. They're giving up almost 157 yards per game on the ground. So with a running quarterback and Elijah Hood, one of the best running backs in the ACC in the backfield, it's going to be very tough sledding for that Baylor defense.
Yeah, if you ask most college football fans to name the best running backs in the nation, it's, of course, Derrick Henry, Leonard Fournette, Christian McCaffrey, Ezekiel Elliott, Dalvin Cook, who joined Hood on the first-team All-ACC squad. Elijah Hood doesn't usually get mentioned in that company. I don't know that he belongs quite in that company, but that is a serious season that really balanced out the offense this year. And North Carolina supporters have been waiting for Elijah Hood's arrival onto the scene with that kind of production, and he really had a big season. I'm impressed with the wide receiver core. It's not just explosive, but Marquise Williams distributes the ball. So I'm looking at a ton of these teams, as you are, in prepping these bowl games, and most quarterbacks have that main guy, then they've got a secondary guy, and then the statistics really fall off in regards to targets and pass distribution. When you look at Carolina, Ryan Switzer, 52 catches, Quinshad Davis, 49, Mac Hollins, with 28, Buck Howard with 26. They work it to the outside with a number of guys.
Yeah, they got a lot of different guys to throw to, and they've been extremely successful this year, like you said. Marquise Williams, completing 64% of his passes this year, and a big reason why is because he has so many different options to throw to, whether it be, the big receivers on the outside like Quinshad Davis and Buck Howard and Mac Hollins, like you spoke of, or if it was somebody in the slot like Ryan Switzer. He had a ton of different options to throw to. There were 4 guys on the roster who had over 20 catches this year. 14 touchdowns combined between Mac Hollins and Ryan Switzer. And, Switzer, we all know how dynamic he is in the kick return game as well. So, in a game that's going to be so defined by offense and which defense can actually get one stop to decide the game, maybe a Ryan Switzer kick return or punt return ends up being the difference. Who knows?
Mike, if there's a fast track to getting to a head coaching spot in college football, it's to become a coordinator and then really improve a porous situation. And that's what Gene Chizik has done, even though we know that he's won a national championship. So for him to gain a head coaching job wouldn't be a whole huge matter for him. But he goes to North Carolina, and they were completely horrendous on defense. They weren't dominant this year by any stretch, not saying that, but they improved just eons this year. And I was looking over the stat sheet, not a ton of guys making huge plays in the backfield, but they just didn't blow coverages. They just didn't make awful plays, missed tackles all over the place. Ethan Farmer with 6 tackles for loss, and Jeff Shetmer with 6 tackles for loss and 2 interceptions. Basically the 2 playmakers, if you want to really look at those statistics as playmaking stats and dynamic playmakers, but it was basically the elimination of the just egregious errors, missed tackles, blown coverages that made this North Carolina defense decent enough to let the offense do its thing and win football games.
Yeah, I think a big thing in this game on the 29th is just for North Carolina to avoid the egregious mistake on defense, like you spoke about. A vast improvement from last year, I think, would be an understatement. I mean, they were one of the worst teams in the country on defense last year. They vastly improved. Now they're only giving up about 22.6 points per game, which is 35th in the country, which is a far cry from where they were last year. So this is a North Carolina defense that improved a ton. If they can avoid that big play, and there's going to be a lot of offense in this game, but if you don't shoot yourself in the foot on defense, I think that means more than almost anything else in this game, because I think the defense that does get that one stop will end up being the victor in this one, because it's just going to be a game that's defined by offense. Baylor and North Carolina both can score with the best of them. I mean, North Carolina has scored almost 41 points per game this year, and Baylor, Baylor puts up a ton of points as well. So I think for North Carolina's defense, for John Schottmer, like you said, and he's the anchor of that linebacking core and of that entire defense. So if the Tar Heels are able to get, one more stop than Baylor, they can win this game.
Baylor not known for defense, but of note, Sean Oakman, who came into the season as a award finalist on a number of watch lists, still had a big year at 14.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. Baylor is stout up front, so it's going to be interesting to see if North Carolina can run the football against the likes of Oakman. Andrew Billings, who's a stud, he had 15.5 tackles for loss and 5 sacks. Jamal Palmer as well, double-digit tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. So Baylor, again, the defense isn't known, but up front, they're very strong. They're going to have to protect Marquise Williams, let him do his thing, and I think they can really hurt the Baylor secondary. So I know we still have about 2 weeks till this one, Mike. Have you figured this one out yet?
Whoever has the ball last is going to win, especially if Baylor has a healthy quarterback. That's, kind of what we're going to have to watch over the next couple of weeks, because we're still not really sure who's going to be a quarterback for the Bears. But assuming they have a healthy quarterback, Jared Stidham, I think, would be ideal. But if it's Chris Johnson, I don't want to say Baylor doesn't have a chance. I still think they have a chance to win the game, especially with how well Shock Linwood's been running the ball. But I think Baylor is a little bit more one-dimensional with Chris Johnson at quarterback. He can still throw the ball pretty well, but Jared Stidham is the guy that North Carolina would least like to face. So I think in this one, since there's so much uncertainty right now as to who the quarterback's going to be for Baylor in this game, I'm going to take North Carolina. They are more healthy than Baylor is right now, and I think their defense is just a little bit better. So I think they get the job done. But it should be an exciting bowl game, a lot of points. If this exceeds 70 or 80 points in this one, I think that's a pretty safe bet. So I'll take the Tar Heels, but it'll be high scoring.
Baylor, North Carolina, and the Russell Athletic Bowl should be a fun one. Mike McDaniel from Inside the ACC helping us break it down. Thanks, Mike.
All right. Thanks, Mark.